Beneath the palms and the postcard perfect beaches, Florida has its ghost, and they are not quiet. This is a state where the land itself feels strange, where cypress knees claw their way from dark swamps, and limestone caverns stretch beneath the surface like veins. The Everglades whisper secrets through the sawgrass, and legends cling to the thick, humid air that blows the Spanish moss hanging from live oaks. Florida is the last stop, the end of the road. It's where people come to vanish in the heat, in the water, in the sprawl. It's where memory slips and timelines blur. And for some, it's where the trail simply ends. From the Panhandle to the Keys, this is 12 Unsolved, Florida. Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha Mae Detective Agency. I'm Agatha Mae, and I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, we're digging through the forgotten corners of the Sunshine State, unearthing 12 mysteries that remain unsolved. And we're starting in St. Petersburg in 1969. On a warm Halloween night in St. Petersburg, Florida, a plain black footlocker was found. It's the kind you'd take to summer camp that would later be relegated as a catch-all for keepsakes and school papers. It was discovered just inside a wooded area off the parking lot of the Oyster Bar restaurant. This trunk wasn't battered and dented as they tended to get, though. It was brand new, purchased for a single purpose, and that purpose was to hold a body. Curled inside the trunk was the body of a woman that had been carefully wrapped in plastic and sealed with masking tape. There was nothing in the trunk or on her body to identify her. An autopsy revealed that the victim had suffered blunt trauma to the head and had been strangled with a red or maroon bolo tie cord about 20 inches in length. She was wearing a green floral print baby doll nightgown with lace at the top. Later, chemical isotope testing offered a few clues. She wasn't from Florida, probably born somewhere in the southeast, and lived in the northern part of that region for a while before she died. She was buried as a Jane Doe in Memorial Park Cemetery in St. Petersburg. She remained a Jane Doe for 53 years until it was discovered that skin and hair samples had been saved from her autopsy. The samples were sent for a DNA analysis, and investigators discovered that Jane Doe was Sylvia June Atherton, a 41-year-old mother of 5. Her husband at the time never reported her missing. He died in 1999, taking any secrets he might have held with him to the grave. If you have any information about Sylvia, please contact the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office at 727-582-6200. Highland City, Florida is a small community east of Tampa, and it was quiet in the fall of 1970, as it is most of the year. Mary Margaret Cook was just 25, a young mother devoted to her 2 little boys, ages 5 and 3. She kept the home running while her husband, Leathern Earl Cook, worked as a house painter trying to make ends meet. On November 14th, as the holiday season crept in, Earl said Mary left the house to go Christmas shopping at the J.M. Field store in nearby Lakeland. She was never seen again. She didn't come home and didn't call. She simply vanished, leaving behind 2 boys who still needed her, and a mystery that still haunts Polk County. Her 1959 Cadillac was found in the parking lot of the store the next day, and her wallet and purse were inside the car. But according to Earl, he had given Mary $200 to buy Christmas presents for their sons, and that was missing. Oddly, or maybe not so oddly, no one at J.M. Fields could recall seeing Mary there the day before. Mary's oldest son had a different story, though. He said that his father and mother had been arguing the night she disappeared. His father came into the house, retrieved a red blanket, and ordered that the son not look outside. Earl was always the prime suspect in Mary's disappearance. In 2003, police dug up the garage floor of the house they'd lived in when Mary disappeared, but nothing was found. There was never enough evidence to charge Earl. He remarried a couple of times and then died in 2007. Investigators believe that Mary was murdered and that her remains are within an hour or so of her residence. If you have any information in the disappearance of Mary Margaret Cook, please contact the Polk County Sheriff's Office at 863-533-0344. It was just before Thanksgiving 1979 when a man's body was found in front of Bob's Motel in Immokalee, Florida, an agricultural community in the Naples-Marcos Island metro where migrant farm workers rise with the sun and vanish just as easily into the haze. The man had no identification. No one came forward to claim him. He became known only as the 1979 Collier County John Doe. We might not know the origins of his journey, but whatever it had been, it ended violently. He had been beaten over the back of the head with a tire iron, badly enough that authorities first believe he'd been hit by a car. His body was left at the edge of the motel parking lot. Years passed with no answers. Then, in 1987, nearly a decade after the murder, a man named Julio Trejo walked into a police station over 1,700 miles away in Garden City, Kansas, and confessed. He said he and the victim had been drinking, sitting in a truck outside the motel, and when John Doe stepped out to relieve himself, Trejo grabbed a tire iron and struck him again and again in the back of the head. Trejo then took $12 off of John Doe's body. For a moment of rage or desperation, Trejo claimed a life and fled. He was convicted in 1991, but while the killer has a name, the victim does not. John Doe was a white and/or Hispanic male who was 5'4" to 5'6" inches and weighed 154 pounds. He had black hair with some graying, a black mustache, and long sideburns. When he was found, he was wearing a red and blue striped shirt, off-white pants, work boots, and brown socks. His personal effects were $10 that his killer missed, a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, a Bic lighter, a blue handkerchief, and an empty key case. To this day, no one knows who 1979 Collier County John Doe was. No family ever came looking, and no match has ever been made, but his life was worth way more than a measly $12. He remains a ghost of the fields, buried without a name, his story still unfinished. If you have any information about John Doe, please contact the Collier County Sheriff's Office at 239-252-9800. 6 years and 6 days after Collier County John Doe was found, 12-year-old Martha Jean Lambert disappeared in Florida's oldest city, St. Augustine. She had gone to visit a neighborhood friend, then left the friend's house to head back home, but after that, it's unclear what happened to Martha. In 2009, Martha's brother David confessed to killing her that day. He said they were both at the abandoned Florida Memorial College, which was a place that kids in the area would go to explore. David said that Martha had gotten mad at him and punched him, so he pushed her. She fell backwards and hit her head on a sharp piece of metal. He claimed he dug a makeshift grave with an old metal sign and buried his sister there. However, police have searched the area and weren't able to locate Martha or any grave. Her brother has since recanted his confession and states he believes she could still be alive. Her mother believes David and thinks her daughter was abducted. There was a statute of limitations on manslaughter in 1985, and since that's what David would have been charged with, he was never arrested. So what is the truth in Martha's disappearance? Did David accidentally kill his sister, or was he covering up for someone else? Why recant his confession if he knew he couldn't be arrested? Martha's case is officially closed, but investigators will reopen it if new information is uncovered. If you have any information about Martha's case, please contact the St. John County Sheriff's Office at 904-824-8304. September 9th, 1988, was a humid, lazy, late summer day. 43-year-old Clarence Eric Dawson, who went by Eric, left his home in Fort Myers, Florida, with a folder in hand and a schedule to keep. He told his wife, Susan, that he'd be back later. He had a 5:45 appointment to show an unidentified potential investor a lot he owned in Estero, Florida, 25 minutes away, where he was planning on building a Christian residential community called Family Land. And that really sounds like it could have been some inspiration for the Righteous Gemstones. Eric never returned home from the showing. The following day, his car was found parked at the Southwest Florida International Airport, but there was no trace of him anywhere. The driver's seat in his car was pulled all the way forward, and Eric was a tall man and needed the seat all the way back. So whoever drove his car to the airport was short. Later that day, Susan reported him missing to the Lee County Sheriff's Office, and it's unclear why she waited to report him missing. Over 2 months passed before Eric's body was ever found. 2 hog hunters were on the property that Eric was going to show to the potential client back in September, and there among the gumbo limbo and cypress trees, they discovered a shallow grave. Well, the wild hogs had discovered it for them. Eric's body had been laid in the grave and then covered with dry concrete mix and left for the Florida rain to take care of the rest. His cause of death was later determined to be a .22 caliber gunshot wound to the back of the head. During the investigation, it was discovered that Eric's finances were in bad shape. He had defaulted on loans, and there were a slew of lawsuits filed against him. His partner, Philip Hawley, was the main suspect in Eric's death. He had taken over Eric's assets in the days before Eric's death and had even forged Eric's signature on a deed in order to steal a piece of property worth $7 million. Philip and his sons were charged with the theft and somehow were given extremely lenient sentences. Philip only had to serve 120 days in jail and was allowed to serve them on the weekends. His sons received no jail time. I'm not saying the judge was paid off in return for the lenient sentences, but how much do you think he was paid? Almost 4 decades later, Eric's murder remains unsolved. If you have any information regarding his case, please contact the Lee County Sheriff's Office at 239-477-1000. Just after sunset on May 12, 1991, the gates to Tallahassee's Old City Cemetery closed for the night. Beneath the moss-draped oaks, rows of the long dead lay in silence. But inside a small shed near the grounds, something brutal had just taken place. The following morning, 66-year-old Seymour Rice was found murdered. His body crumpled in the makeshift office where he worked as an unarmed security guard. He had been hit on the head with a pickaxe. Seymour was a World War II veteran and a lifelong lawman. He had just moved to Tallahassee 2 weeks earlier to be near his sister. It was supposed to be a quiet retirement. Instead, his life ended in a cemetery, surrounded by the very peace he thought he'd earned. Witnesses said they saw him that night at the Greyhound station, caught in a confrontation with a man around 10 p.m., just as Seymour's overnight shift began. He was seen being chased. Investigators later found blood on his neatly polished shoes, and his wallet had been rifled through. His family was told quietly, off the record, that police had someone in mind, a known offender, and they said an arrest was coming, but it never did. Decades have passed, leads have dried up, and the man who devoted his life to justice has yet to receive any of his own. If you have any information about the murder of Seymour Rice, please contact the Tallahassee Police Department at 850-891-4462. It was an ordinary winter afternoon on Seaship Place in Palm Coast, Florida, January 10, 1993. Two boys were playing basketball at the end of their quiet cul-de-sac when their basketball took an unexpected bounce and rolled into the edge of the woods. They looked for it in the brush, but what they found instead was a secret that had been hidden beneath the trees: the skeletal remains of a woman. For nearly 3 decades, her story was a blank page. She was believed to be around 25 to 35 years old. At first, investigators thought she might be of Indian descent, and that, like so many other unidentified victims, she had simply slipped through the cracks. Then, in 2021, using advanced DNA testing, Othram Incorporated built a full genetic profile of the woman once called Palm Coast Jane Doe. She was not Indian, she was black, possibly of mixed black and Caucasian heritage. Through investigative genetic genealogy, researchers were able to trace her roots to the Edgefield and Aiken areas of South Carolina, linking her to a couple named George Washington Coleman and Clarissa Minnick. 30 relatives were identified and all were contacted, but none knew her name. No one reported her missing. No one remembered a cousin or niece who disappeared. There was no photo to match, no date to anchor the timeline. It was as if she had existed outside the bounds of family, beyond the reach of memory. Was she the child of a son who never knew she'd been born? A child lost to adoption or swallowed up by the foster system? Her face has been reconstructed, her DNA mapped, and still no one knows who she is. Palm Coast Jane Doe remains without a name nearly 32 years later, a family tree with no label for the branch she once occupied. She's a woman hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to remember. If you have any information about Jane Doe, please contact the Flagler County Sheriff's Office at 386-313-4911. Lake Como, Florida is the kind of place where time feels slowed and the hush of the lake is constant, like a lullaby for the living and the lost. It was here, in a small home on Lake Margaret Boulevard, that Mary Roderick was last seen on December 16, 1994. Then, nothing. There were no missing persons flyers, no urgent phone calls or midnight searches. Mary simply vanished, quietly and completely. It wasn't until early the next year that the silence around Mary started to get much louder. And it wasn't a friend or a family member that made it louder. It was the phone company. Mary's bill hadn't been paid in months and had somehow ballooned to $3,500. On February 1st, 1994, investigators finally went to her house. Her adult son told them that she was down in Fort Lauderdale with a boyfriend and was due back on the 8th. But the 8th came and went, and no one had actually seen Mary in 2.5 months, and none of the other family members knew anything about a boyfriend. Her son, as it turned out, had been forging and cashing her checks. He was eventually imprisoned, but on unrelated charges. As for Mary, there was no sign of her and no evidence of where she went. Today, nearly 3 decades later, Mary Roderick is still missing. Foul play is suspected. But the truth, whatever it may be, remains sealed behind closed doors and faded blinds in a quiet neighborhood where the lake still sleeps. If you have any information about Mary's case, please contact the Putnam County Sheriff's Office at 386-329-0825. April 21st, 1995, was the kind of morning that should have been forgettable, just another normal Friday. Brenda Snaufer, 35 years old, drove her 6-year-old daughter to school in Ocala, Florida. She dropped her off at 9:15 a.m., like always, and promised to be back that afternoon. But she never came. Brenda vanished sometime between school drop-off and dismissal. At the time, Brenda was entangled in a bitter divorce and a volatile custody battle with her estranged husband, Scott Snaufer. But there was more. Brenda was also a key witness in a looming criminal trial, one involving Scott and his brother Stuart. The two were facing serious charges for running a chop shop, and Brenda was set to testify against them. And then she was gone. The same day she disappeared, someone mailed threatening letters, one to Brenda's home and another to a friend's address in Ohio. Whatever the sender hoped to silence, it worked. Without Brenda's testimony, Stuart Snalfer walked free. Scott had some of his charges dropped, but was still convicted of several crimes and sentenced to 9 years in prison and 7 years probation. He has refused to cooperate with the investigation ever since and has not been ruled out as a suspect. Brenda's car, a turquoise blue 1993 Mazda Protege with Florida plate LEA 14U, was never found. It vanished along with her. It's been 30 years. Brenda's daughter is now grown, but her mother's story is still unfinished, tied to legal secrets, missing evidence, and a silence that feels very intentional. Someone wanted Brenda gone, and whoever it was succeeded. If you have any information about her disappearance, please contact the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office at 727-582-6200. January 4th, 2004 was a chilly day in Stark, Florida, at least chilly by Florida standards. Sandra Gan was last seen at 5 a.m. leaving her residence. According to Dwayne Edward Gan, her husband of just 6 months, Sandra left their home with someone he didn't know, heading to work. But her daughter isn't buying it. She says her mother always drove herself and it would be strange for her to leave with anyone else. Even stranger is that Sandra's personal belongings, including her purse, keys, and driver's license, were found on top of her light blue Chevrolet truck parked outside her home. 2 days later, on January 6th, her daughter reported her missing. The same day that Sandra vanished, the mobile home that she shared with Dwayne went up in flames, burning to the ground. Was the fire an accident or just a convenient way to get rid of evidence? Despite a wide search, Sandra vanished without a trace. Her family paints a picture of a responsible woman, someone who wouldn't just disappear without a word. Dwayne Gann and his sister Deborah Sue Starling are both considered persons of interest. They were the last 2 people known to have seen Sandra. Deborah lived next door to Sandra and Dwayne, and the police searched her place, but what they found, if anything, hasn't been released. Back in May of 2003, before Sandra and Dwayne were married, he was charged with aggravated battery after a domestic violence incident with Sandra, but Sandra dropped the charges. Dwayne has a record stretching back to 1978 and is currently in prison, though on charges unrelated to Sandra's case. Sandra's case remains open and authorities suspect foul play. If you have any information about her case, please contact the Bradford County Sheriff's Office at 904-966-6304. In the early morning of April 30th, 2004, before the humidity had taken over the day and the Gulf beaches were still quiet, Coy Prescott said goodbye to his wife, Elizabeth Iris Pagliacetti Prescott, known as Beth, in Callaway, Florida, and went to work. Beth was only 19, and she and Coy had only been married a short 2 months. Coy called Beth around 2:30 p.m. to let her know that he had left work and was approximately an hour away from home. This call went unanswered. When Coy walked through the door an hour later, the house was empty. A damp towel was hanging in the bathroom, and Beth's things were all in their place, except for one thing. $50 was missing. The next morning, with Beth still gone, Coy reported her missing. Somewhere between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. the day before, Beth had just disappeared. From the start, the search for Beth was intense. Officially, it's a missing persons case, but authorities have openly stated they're treating it as a homicide, citing the suspicious circumstances. In 2007, a large search party combed a 2-acre patch of woods and a small stagnant drainage pond near the Prescott home, but no evidence was found. Today, Elizabeth's case remains open and hopes for new evidence to present itself and new leads to follow up on in her disappearance. If you have any information, please contact the Bay County Sheriff's Office at 850-747-4700. Satsuma, Florida is a quiet, sleepy community that sits in a crook of the winding St. John River. But in the early hours of February 10th, 2009, that stillness was shattered. 5-year-old Haley Cummings vanished from her family's trailer while she slept. She was last seen alive by her father's girlfriend, Misty Crosland, who was watching the children while Ronald Cummings worked the night shift. Misty told police that she tucked Haley into bed around 10 p.m., and when she woke at 3 a.m., the little girl was gone. The back door was wide open, propped with a cinder block. There were no signs of forced entry and no sounds to wake the neighbors, just an open door and a missing child. Misty and Ronald both insisted the back door had been locked, but questions quickly began to swirl. Haley's younger brother told authorities he saw a man dressed in black come into the trailer that night and take her. But at his age, investigators struggled to determine how much of that story was memory, how much was imagination, or how much was fed to him. In the months that followed, both Misty and Ronald were arrested on drug trafficking charges. Misty received a lengthy sentence and remains incarcerated, with no release expected before 2031. Ronald was released in 2022, but then arrested a couple of months later on drug charges and battery on an officer. He was sentenced on April 8, 2025 to 6.5 years. Neither Misty nor Ronald have ever been charged in connection with Haley's disappearance, but the cloud of suspicion has never lifted. Despite extensive searches, tip lines, and national media coverage, Haley Cummings has never been found. Her case, once classified as a missing child investigation, is now considered a homicide. And somewhere in Satsuma, beneath the long shadows of moss-draped trees and forgotten trails, the truth still waits. If you have any information about Haley's disappearance, please contact the Putnam County Sheriff's Office at 386-329-0800. And that brings us to the end of our journey through Florida's shadows. 12 lives, 12 mysteries, and 12 families still waiting for answers. Some say the dead still whisper in the cypress groves. Others say the missing are never truly gone, just lost between the heat and the haze, waiting to be named again. Some of these cases may be solved with time, and others maybe not, but they all deserve to be remembered. In the next episode of 12 Unsolved, we head north, just over the state line into Georgia, a land of red clay and railroad towns, where the peaches are sweet, but sometimes the past is bitter. We'll uncover another 12 cases, missing persons, murders, and cold trails that wind through pine forest and Civil War graveyards. Some say the past never stays buried in Georgia. We're about to find out. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and comment, as this helps my channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.